Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Fade to Black. So, this is a really interesting movie that I kind of randomly found, just because digging for a while to try to find something really unique that just made me go, wow. Such a movie. Such an interesting film. How this movie and how it's to play out is to just be so unique, and I'm like, why hasn't this film been remade? Why hasn't this film been rebooted? Hands down, you could probably still make this film today, but slightly tweak it for modern time. You can slightly adjust it to make a bigger budgeted film, but you could still get all the exact same bullet points together and the movie would still work to this day. So what is to be this film as a concept, because that's probably the best part about this film, is just the concept. And then we get into this kind of interesting but unique story that, like, even though I do say unique, it does kind of have some shades of certain things like Cable Guy, the Jim Carrey movie, or it does have like some kind of horror, universal horror kind of elements to it. There really is some bits and pieces of this that do come off as like some horror parody movies at some point, but that's kind of a real small thing. So going into this, what is the concept? Well, we have a man who is to thoroughly be enthralled or enjoy a film, so much so that he had gone at a certain point to go to 3 movies every day during a certain portion of time. And this character is a movie buff of sorts, but it is to be, of course, during a time period where a lot of people may not get the references of this, because if you're a person that has seen any black and white films, you may not understand exactly what's going on here. It seems that Binford, who is to be the main character, is to be infatuated with Marilyn Monroe, who some people may not even know who that is, and I can understand that because not everybody is to be, of course, a cinema or movie buff of sorts, but because this is to go on and showcase a number of films as far as references or certain cuts of certain films, like Creature of the Black Lagoon, Mark of the Vampire, White Heat, the original Public Enemy, Horror of Dracula, Night of the Living Dead from '68, Kiss of Death, Casablanca, The Mummy, and of course the 1978 movie Halloween. So if you probably don't even know any of those films, more likely you may not get the reference of this film. But I rather enjoy this film, and even if you don't understand the reference, you can understand that this guy is a film buff, and he eventually forces his information on people, or he tricks people to just kind of get under their skin, or when Binford is to really just start to lose his mind, so much to the point of him carrying a completely different persona, which of course is to be a guy named Cody Jarrett, and taking on that character, we get Benford, which for a lot of people, if anybody knows, of course, the Tim Allen show, Home Improvement, Benford is the company that Tim Allen is to, of course, have sponsored on Tool Time. And when I kept hearing Benford, I'm like, why does that name sound familiar to me? And then I realized, oh my god, that's Home Improvement, Tool Time's sponsor, because they, I guess, couldn't get Craftsman, so I guess they had to get a made-up tool company called Benford. So, going on in this film, we have this man who is to be Benford, who is to go under certain disguises to possibly, whether by his own devices or just by him scaring somebody basically to death. Benford is to go into each one of these scenarios as a different person from a different movie at some point. Like, of course, we have him as Dracula at one point. We have him as the Mummy. We also have him seemingly as certain characters, which I'll get into in spoilers, but we also have him as Hopalong Cassidy. We also have him as, of course, Cody Jarrett with a Tommy gun of sorts. And it seems that there is, of course, also to be this infatuation with Marilyn Monroe. So much so that there is to be a recreation of a movie called The Prince and the Showgirl within this film, as we have Benford's character that is to recreate being the Prince Regent of Carpathia, and so, like, that's kind of an interesting it's kind of an interesting kind of, like, window of time, of course, for, like, people to, like, have this old kind of black and white film kind of feel. So, with that said, yeah, because some people would have immediately lost interest by now, because they're like, yeah, I'm not a black and white movie person, I don't care about this, so that's okay. But I'm going to go out of my way to say that it's that customary time yet again to go into spoilers, because really I think I kind of teed it up in a way. It's either people are interested or they're not. But this guy is so addicted to film that eventually he loses his mind. And I'll give you the fact that the beginning of this, it's a kind of like, there's a part in the beginning where, like, I wasn't really sold quite that bit, or quite that well, and so I had to go further into the film to really just start to enjoy it, and really just start to be like, man, this is a unique, like, film, because he's basically a killer cosplayer. He's kind of goes on to take every single one of these personas and is to go off and kill people. I'm like, man, what if they would have done that in much more modern time and had at one point maybe like a robot who's to look similar to the Terminator? What if we had another character? Well, yeah, it can be villainous characters. So yeah, like, it can be like villainous, or maybe if the person, like, were like, what if we made up a world where a guy was to be this monster man, and he had done several films that were to be of certain monsters, and so once this guy snaps, he goes into all of these monster suits that he has ever done through his time, because he had kept the suits for whatever reason. And he starts going after people and killing them for revenge purposes, which is basically what Benford does in this film. But like he does it through kind of more iconic character kind of means, but like my concept would feel slightly tweakingly different. So with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this one because I can go on and on about this. I just was so like, I know this movie is not a great film. Like, I know it's not a movie that people are going to immediately just like, yeah, this is the greatest film I've ever seen. But it's good enough. I think it's good enough. People may feel differently. People may not like it. But, like, I thought that this movie was interesting enough. I like movies like Jim Carrey's Cable Guy, where you have this guy taking a number of personas from a movie or from a TV thing. So we also have, interestingly enough, we have Mickey Rourke in this film, who plays supposedly the villain in one part of this film. Very young Mickey Rourke. It's kind of interesting to just kind of see a window of time where Mickey Rourke was to look a certain way or to be so young. And so, with that said, let's just go into this. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of the film, we are to have, of course, Binford, who is going and talking to his aunt Stella Binford, and we find out later in the film, also I forgot to mention, like, where can you go and see this film? Technically, right now, I went on to Amazon, and I conveniently had AMC Plus, so, like, that was the convenient way that I saw this. And so for some people, they might justify, like, renting this, possibly, if they have a couple bucks. For all the apps that I usually go into, I couldn't find a way to conveniently see this for free. So I just had to dig down and search and try to find a way to watch this film. And, like, I think it's worth renting. I think it's worth going and trying to find it into some app, which in this case would be AMC Plus. And, like, or either that or finding it on Amazon for a very cheap price. If you can find a disc copy of it, a Blu-ray, whatever copy, it's probably really cheap. So you could probably, instead of renting something, you could probably buy the film. But again, it's your debate, it's your debacle. If this seems like a good enough movie for you, because I even tried to look it up on YouTube to just kind of see if I could find a bootleg copy of it, and I couldn't. YouTube, you can, like, rent and buy it there, so to each their own. So now we got that out of the way, let's go into spoilers. So like I said, Binford is going and talking to his aunt, and of course his aunt is putting him down, just ridiculing him for, of course, being this movie snob of a person. But it seems that Binford and his aunt Stella are to have these exchanges of movie things. And so she is to, like, basically put down this guy, but then also it seems that at some point, like, they, of course, are talking in the same language of film at some point. We find out Aunt Stella used to be some kind of dancer, but then it seems that she was to have gotten into an accident and is now forced to be in some wheelchair, which is sadly enough. So, while Binford is getting ridiculed by his aunt, he is to just get so frustrated that when he is to go and have his breakfast, he is to recreate a scene from The Public Enemy where he is shoving a grapefruit almost temptingly into his aunt's face to recreate a scene from the original Public Enemy black and white film, which we actually see frame to frame in the actual film. And so Binford doesn't actually go and shove this grapefruit into his aunt's face, but he gets so close. We also have Binford, who is smoking quite often, and his aunt doesn't like that either. So we push on. So Binford is to go off to his job, and we find out that his job is, of course, to be a person that is to put together, I guess, movie posters of sorts. And there's this kind of really interesting visual where Binford is to enter this studio place that they were to have been working on seemingly a number of films, because we just see this huge roll of all these films that are to be put on these shelves. And so it's like, okay, this is so like fascinating. Is it like, are all these films actual films that are to quite possibly go out? Are all these films to have just been like stuck here for storage because there's nowhere else for them to go? So Binford, of course, is to talk to his boss, Marty, and so, because Marty needs Binford to go off and do some part of his job that he should have done the day before, and Binford is to go and walk off and do this job, but he realizes that he doesn't have any gas money, so he goes back to his employer, and of course at Marty, and asks for an extension on his paycheck. And so we have Marty, who is basically just taking apart Binford's next check by having him say, it's like, well, hey, like, you're late on putting this project out, that's going to be cut in your check. Oh, you want an extension on your check? Well, we're going to cut that out of your next pay also, and this and that, and so on and so forth. So, but Eric ends up getting petty cash, and very rarely do I ever hear the word petty cash uttered in a film. The only time that I've ever heard the word petty cash, both those words, being placed in a film was in the very first Ghostbusters movie, where Peter, Ray, and Egon were all sitting eating their Chinese food, and Ray is to tell Peter that this is the last, the petty cash. And it's like, yeah, I've never heard that phrase before besides here now. So I just thought that was funny. So Binford is to go off and do the job that he is supposed to do. And before he goes off, he is to find a guy named Richie and a guy named Bart. And so Binford is to ask these guys, like, hey, like, I'm going to bet you $40 that you don't know the name of a certain character in Casablanca. And Richie's like, I've seen that movie back and forward. Like, I've seen that, I've seen that, I can, like, regurgitate it back in my head and everything like that. Like, I know it backwards and forwards and this and that. So Eric is like, oh, good. So Binford is to, of course, ask Richie what the name of Casablanca's star uh, Rick's last name is to be. What is Rick's last name? And so Binford is to tell both the guys, hey, I'll give you guys 2 days to come up with this answer. If you can't come up with this answer, then you owe me $40. And so Richard's like, well, what happens if we win? And he's like, well, I'll give you guys $50. So like, all right. So what ends up happening is they can't come up with a name, and so Binford, of course, is to ask for these $40, and they refuse to give it to him, just frustrating this guy more to rely on this money that he's not getting from these guys. And it seems that Binford, maybe the quite possible reason why he lost that petty cash before is from all the bidding wars that he was to have with Richie. So we get where it seems Richie starts going and is building to be this bully of Binford, at some point going and taking this film reel and kind of strangling Binford, like jokingly, but like we just start to see both of these characters are really just starting to really just get annoyed with one another, because Binford is to just like be this smart guy and is to kind of thrust his movie knowledge upon people whether they like it or not. And so Binford goes off and is to, of course, go and get this job that he needs to do done. And so he is to go and take a break and go to this one diner where he is to see a girl there that is to have this remarkable resemblance to Marilyn Monroe. This guy looks at this girl and it's like he assumes that or sees in his mind that she's the spitting image of Marilyn Monroe, and this girl is to all of a sudden is to be singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," of course, just like Marilyn Monroe had. And so Binford is all of a sudden daydreaming, and Binford goes and starts to like shift from stool to stool to stool to get far much closer to this table that Marilyn O'Connor is to be sitting at. And so Binford is to tell Marilyn, you know, you look very much like Marilyn Monroe. And so Marilyn's friend is to say, like, yeah, she gets that all the time. Like, the girl could dye her hair. Like, the girl could change the way her hair is presented to stop that that consistent asking or whatever. But I think she does it on purpose. Really, I think she does it on purpose. But so Binford, of course, is to ask this girl, it's like, well, hey, like, if you probably know about Marilyn Monroe, what movie did she go to in the 7-year itch? What movie did she go on and go with her date to the 7-year itch? And neither one of them could figure out what it is, and so Binford gives a hint, and it's like, okay, well, it's a monster movie, and the monster's green, and it's slimy, and they're like, I don't know. So he starts reenacting what Creature of the Black Lagoon is, and we start to see the archive footage, the black and white version of Creature of the Black Lagoon, like in the frame. So it's like, so when he's actually giving these references, there's actually footage to back this up, which I thought was so cool. And that's what I liked about this film, is they actually went on to go and take all these films and actually place them throughout so we can have the understanding of what this is or what all these characters are if we're not familiar with it for whatever reason. So the girls can't figure it out, and so Binford is to say, well, it's a Creature of the Black Lagoon. And they're like, oh, no, they probably never heard of it in their lives. So Binford is to, I guess, eventually go off, and so Marilyn is to decide to go with him because she needs to get dropped off somewhere. And so Binford is to ask Marilyn, it's like, well, hey, do you want to go on a date tonight? Do you want to go out to the movies? And she's like, yeah, that sounds great. So Binford is on like cloud nine because he asked out a girl. She said yes. And so like Binford is not going to go in a costume or something like that yet. But anyways, so Binford is to go to this movie theater, and he's waiting, and he's waiting, and he's waiting. And so we find out Marilyn is to get mixed up with a guy named Joey. And Joey's hitting on her, mentioning that, like, this girl is so beautiful, mentioning Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn is to also in this movie be a woman trying to get an acting role, trying to get a gig somewhere, and she's really struggling to find some job somewhere. So Marilyn and Joey are on this date, and Marilyn realizes that she's like, oh my god, like, I have to be somewhere, because, like, I was supposed to be somewhere hours ago, and I completely forgot. Binford, before he left on this date, he had to go and beg his aunt for money, and like, his aunt was so impressed with Binford because this is the one time that actually Binford dressed up really nice and seemed to clean his room. And so Aunt Stella is like, wow, Binford, like, I'm so, like, surprised. I'm so, like, what's going on? So Binford, of course, begs for money, and so his aunt is like, okay, but, like, when you get home, like, you're gonna go and you're gonna like, rub my back to kind of make up for that I gave you this money. So Binford's like, okay. So Binford goes off and waits for this girl and waits for her. I'm really dragging this out, and I don't mean to. This girl doesn't seem to show up. So Binford just starts walking around, and he is just very sad and depressed. You can just tell, like, he's just kind of like, like, this girl didn't come. Seems like she was nice. Binford goes and, like, continues to look for, like, blonde-haired girls, realizing that these aren't the girl that is to be his. So Binford walks off, and so finally this girl arrives at this place that now Binford is not at. And so she's like, crap. So she gives up, she makes it back home, and so now Binford is to go into his room and is to just watch this old movie And we have it to where, like, I guess maybe Binford maybe had, like, been, like, I don't know why his eyes are so puffy in this situation. Like, was he, like, crying in between scenes? Was this a really late night of watching movies? Because Binford is just trying to feel better about him basically getting rejected. And so his aunt is to just be so frustrated with Binford because he lent him money and no back massage, and like she's just tired of his lifestyle. She's just tired of the fact that he's just super glued himself into these movies, and that's all that matters to him. And she's just tired of it. She's had enough. And so we also just get to a point where now we just have Binford that's had enough. Just kind of enough ridicule, enough being put down. And so finally, it seems that his aunt, when trying to go out of this room, his aunt ends up getting his wheelchair stuck, and so now his aunt needs to help Binford needs to help his aunt get out of this room. And so Binford does that and then some. Because Binford goes and is to recreate a scene from a movie called Kiss of Death, where Binford is to take his aunt and take her outside to this stairwell and push her down these flights of stairs while in her wheelchair, and his aunt is to die once falling down these flight of stairs, sadly enough. So Binford now, after his aunt is to die, and I guess he's to get the insurance money from her death, Binford is to weirdly go and change his name to Cody Jarrett, and there's to be a mailman come to his house and like think that he is to no longer be home. He's like, no, I'm still home. I'm still home. Like, it's Cody Jarrett, because this girl like continues to call him Binford for whatever goofy reason. So now that Binford has snapped, Binford is, of course, to go on and is to start becoming this this killing entity. So when Binford was to go and wait for Marilyn nearby this movie theater, Binford is to talk to this hooker. And so Binford is to not have any money to his name. He has like $10. And so Binford is just like, well, hey, I got $10. What is that going to get me? And the girl is like, cat food? Because, like, you ain't getting any of this. So the girl ends up going to this car and driving off. And so now Binford is to go off to a movie dressed in Dracula costume, full on white faced, full on Dracula costume, and he is going to see Night of the Living Dead, the black and white variation. And so and there seems to be a ton of people around going and seeing this film. So Binford is to watch this film eating popcorn, full-on Dracula costume for whatever reason, because it doesn't quite match what's going on here. But I guess if he was to just be a zombie, it probably wouldn't have made sense, possibly for the time. But I thought that probably would have been fun, but that would have kept with the concept, but it's, I guess, too late. So Binford, after this movie is over, we have Binford bump into the Lady of the Night that he had met before. And so, Lady of the Night, Prince of Darkness, match made in heaven, right? So, we have Count Dracula, technically now, who is to be by this woman's car, and he's to ask her, like, hey, like, got any plans tonight? And so the girl is to just kind of be creeped out by this guy dressed in full Dracula getup. And so she decides to just run off. And so while she's running off, we have Dracula chasing after her. Costumed Dracula, not legitimate Dracula. And so this guy chases after her, and coincidentally, this woman is running all over the place because this guy is scaring her to death. And this woman accidentally goes and falls onto this part of this fence, and she jabs herself in the neck, killing herself off, and she falls over. So Binford goes over her body and is to take a thing of blood and consume it, but then he goes in and is to seem like he is consuming or sucking on this girl's blood, having his mouth and his face just with blood of this girl. And so we have a death happen upon us here, which is kind of a parody kind of variation. Like, I've seen certain, like Shriek, I Know What You Did Last Friday the 13th, or some goofy parody movie, where the killer is trying to go after and trying to kill people, and they coincidentally end up killing themselves for some accidental reason. I'm like, oh my god, is this how this movie is going to all happen? And it really doesn't all happen that way. He actually does kill people in this film, but some are actually done by accidents, or whichever. So now we push on, and so the next move is to cover a character called Dr. Jerry Moriarty, which is kind of a weird, like, isn't that Sherlock Holmes's villain? Dr. Jerry Moriarty is to come into this police precinct and is to go on to do what in this precinct? I don't really know, because it seems like this character just kind of sits around a lot. Even if they are to say what he had done in past previous life of sorts before he came here, I'm still just like, okay, what does this guy even do? Why are they flipping the bill for this guy? I'm confused. Like, why is he even here, present and accounted for? But so, really, this guy is, I guess, to be the technical villain of our Binford, because I think we would like to root for a cosplayer murderer, even though we shouldn't, for whatever reason. So Dr. Jerry is to mix it up with Officer Anne And they eventually sleep together, and they eventually like seem to have a relationship with one another. At some point, it seems that Dr. Jerry is going and maybe doing a stretch of coke at some point in this movie when he has nothing better to do, and Officer Ann sees that and she doesn't like report him in or anything because he's a freaking doctor. So yeah, not much for me to really give about the the police side of things. So now let's go back to Binford. So after his kill of this lady of the night, Binford is to go off and find where Marilyn is to hang her hat, where she is to go home. And so Marilyn goes and, of course, is to go into her shower and is to go on and, of course, doing showerly things. And so Binford, still in Dracula costume, is to go on and sneak into Marilyn's place and is to recreate the psycho scene where Binford is to go and pull the shower curtains and is to try and stab Marilyn with this old-fashioned metal pin. To not stab her at all, he is to just drop the pen and run off, and he is to mention, "I only wanted your autograph." But he's really just doing this just to scare her. But he runs off. So, next up, because the police can't figure this out, it seems that Dr. Jerry is to say when there's to be more and more killings that there might be a connection between them, but like there's no real sure thing about this. So the next we have is, of course, to have Binford finally deal with Richie. So that is, of course, when Binford goes to Richie and be like, "Hey, where's my money?" And Richard's like, "Hey, man, like, we wouldn't pay you for price of admission," and all this, like, goofy, weird, like, I'm probably not getting that line delivery right, but, like, it sounds something like that, about the price of admission. So, like, they're just exhausted or tired of, like, just Binford being right, or Binford being smarter than them. And so they really just want to put him in his nerdy place. And so they kind of go and they, like, pretend to strangle him with this film reel, but he breaks it off because he's just annoyed with them. So both Bart and Richie go off to this amusement park where Richie is to tell Bart, it's like, man, what are we doing here? Like, aren't we here to get laid? Aren't we here to get girls? And Bart's like, well, yeah, like, where should we go? And so they continue to go through this amusement park, and all of a sudden, both of them head into this dark alley, and they end up being met by, of course, a guy called Hopalong Cassidy, who is to be this old Western villain. So Hopalong Cassidy goes and takes this gun and chucks it to Richie. And so Richie's like, "Oh, I get what we're doing here. This is an old-fashioned duel." Ah, alright. So we have, of course, that Richie is to kind of put his gun, like in front of his pants. And so Richie ends up whipping his gun out and shooting Cassidy. And so there's no bullets in the gun. So he's like, dude, what is this? Like, what is going on here? And so Hopalong Cassidy is to whip out his gun and is to shoot Richie because his gun actually has bullets. So Richie is to fall over. Bart, of course, is to run off. And so Hopalong Cassidy is to go and shoot Richie because of the money of which that he technically owed him, as well as just a number of problems that continue to rise with Richie. So we find out that nobody knew that it was Benford under that mask, and so Bart was to go off to the authorities, and so did Benford, because I guess Benford would have a motive against Richie, because technically they were at odds with one another. So Benford goes and talks to this Dr. Jerry, and Dr. Jerry is to say, like, there's something about that Benford. I can't put my finger on it, but, like, there's something, like, broken about this kid. And so Bart goes on and is to tell the authorities what happened, but there's really nothing they could do. There's nothing, like, this is just a random killing that they couldn't pin on anybody. So both Benford and Bart are heading out of this building, and they're talking about what happened, and so Benford is just becoming a much more and more confident person about all this. And you would have thought at some point that Bart would have been the next on the chopping block. You would have probably naturally assumed that Benford would have been next, but like, I guess not, right? So, but we push on. So Eric is to head back to his work. And so Eric is, of course, kind of treating his job like he really just does not care anymore, and that whatever is to happen is to happen. And so Eric is to have a conversation with his boss, Marty, and Eric is to bring up that he's going to get married. Binford is to bring up that he's going to get married. And so Marty is to be like, what creature is to marry you? And so Binford is like, well, I'm going to be married to Marilyn Monroe. Because Binford is to have this fantasy about Marilyn Monroe, even so much so that he ends up going home and fapping to the imagery of her. So Marty is to go and spit out his sandwich and like, you know what, kid? Like, I think I'm just going to let you go. Like, so Marty is to, of course, keep every poster that Eric is to have done to try to make money off of Binford, with, I guess, without Binford, of course, getting paid. And so that's when Binford is to just get really, of course, upset with his boss, and he is to just go on and walk off. So Binford is also have this dialogue with Bart, mentioning that Marty is to go under the knife soon, and Binford is like, well, why? And Bart was to mention that he has a bad ticker, that, like, his heart is to be very weak. Hence why we see Marty going and taking medication when he is to yell at Binford early on in this movie. So Binford realizing that is like, So Marty is to close up shop by himself. And so it seems that Sam is to go and tell Binford about the goings on. And so Marty is to tell Sam, like, Sam, we're a bell. like I should hear you coming from a mile away, and I can't. So that's like when you get a lot of jobs, you would normally hear the steps of people. And so normally when you would start to hear the steps of people, immediately that's when you would start to be like a lot more quiet in certain jobs, when you're just kind of waiting for someone to just kind of walk back by and whichever. So Binford is, of course, to make his way back into his previous employer, but with a certain different set of clothes, because Binford is to wrap himself up in a mummy costume, and is to go and grab his boss through this movie poster and try to pull him through this movie poster to scare him. And so Marty's like, "Oh my god!" So Marty is just start to freak out. Binford as the mummy is to start walking to make it to Marty. So now Marty's like, "Oh my god." Marty's scrambling through this place, trying to get out of here, and we just have this scene where Binford has this flashlight, and he's just trying to, like, mummy-wise, have this flashlight. We really have this scene where Binford is to, like, put this flashlight on his face, I guess, so you can consistently see the mummy kind of thing, and this doesn't feel like a ruined effect. But I wish that this place that, like, the mummy was in was just lit a little bit better so we can see this mummy effect. Like, we could have probably used another costume that was to be different, that didn't seem this extensive, and, like, wasn't, like, could have been seen better at some points, and could have, like, justified, like, man, you're putting in a lot of work for somebody to not really see this all that well at some points. So now Marty is to go into this fire exit door, and he can't get out of it. And so Marty is to grab this axe and is to go and try to chuck it against this door. But Marty is really just getting a lot of like things upon weakening his heart. So plus Marty is really under duress here. So the closer and closer that Binford as this mummy is to get to Marty, Marty has a heart attack. Marty falls over and tries to desperately scramble for his medication, but he cannot get his medication, so Marty is to die. So now we scramble off to seemingly have one way or another where it still feels like all these deaths that are kind of happening in this town feel connected, whether they can be an accident or not. It's still like, I don't know, that Binford guy, it seems like there's this weird bizarro like connection with this Binford guy, and Dr. Jerry just can't let it go. So now we go on, and so now Binford is to start meeting other people. And so now the next contestant on You're Probably Going to Die Soon is to be a guy named Gary. So Gary seems to be an actor. It seems like he's kind of working on something. Well, actor slash person who works on movies is what I want to say, because like I'm probably going to get this horrifically wrong for whatever reason. So Garrett is to or Garrett what because I was gonna say his other name. So Cody Jarrett, who is Binford, is to be thumbing it, hitchhiking off the side of the road because Binford gave up his scooter because his scooter was a company owned vehicle, I guess. So he can no longer drive that scooter because it no longer belongs to him. So, because he only does that for deliveries, and I guess he technically kept the vehicle while working for that job. So, Binford gets picked up by Gary, and so Binford is to ask what Gary does, and he's like, "Oh, well, like I work in movies." And so Binford is like, "Oh, you don't say." It's like, "Well, hey, like I just I'm sure you hear this all the time. I'm sure you get like scripts and ideas kind of thrown to you all the time." And so Binford goes on and is to rattle off this movie uh, to be called, I think it's called like the Alamo and 40 Thieves or some goofy title like that. And so it's some goofy, weird 40 Thieves kind of film. And so Binford is give this guy this whole idea, and he's like, "Wow, that's actually a really great idea. Hey, man, you know what? Like, I'm gonna have a movie premiere coming up soon, and like, how about you come to this movie premiere? It seems like you really have a good eye for film, and like I think you have something here. So how about we kind of go and re-meet up, and we can kind of talk about this more." And so Binford is like, "Oh my god, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I would love to go and just talk about movies and whatever." And Gary's like, "Well, that's great." So Binford ends up getting dropped off. And so later we find Binford going and watching some TV where Gary all of a sudden is getting interviewed. And so this woman is to ask, of course, Gary, like, "Hey, what's the next project that you're going to be doing, you're going to be putting together?" And so Gary's to mention, like, "Yeah, I'm working on this 40 Thieves film." And so this woman is like, "Wow, that's such an interesting film. Like, where did you get this concept from? Where did you get this idea from?" And so Gary's like, "Well, you know what? Like, I was just kind of like, I had just bought this brand new car and I was just driving along. And so all of a sudden, this idea of this movie just immediately just popped into my brain. It just went in there and it was just like, it was just an amazing feeling of just me coming up with this idea, and it was so great." And yeah. So Binford watching this interview was like, I'm gonna get even with you." And so Gary is like finishing up with this interview, and it's wrapping up. And so all of a sudden he gets a phone call from this TV station, and so Gary picks it up, and weirdly it's Binford. It's like, "Hey, Gary, like you said that we were gonna meet up again with one another. What about that whole 40 Thieves idea? Like, hey, like, do you have any kind of interesting ideas to just kind of like add to what I kind of told you before, and so on and so forth?" And so Gary's like, "You know what? Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And like, first of all, like I don't even pick up hitchhikers, and two, I never take anybody's ideas of any film, because I could possibly get sued. And so Binford is now furious because it's like, oh my god, you not only stole my idea, but now you're not gonna give me credit for this thing. I'm going to murder you. So Gary is to go off and I guess get a freaking haircut or a shave or maybe a combination of the two. And so Binford is to arrive as a spitting image of Cody Jarrett with this Tommy gun, and Gary is to think that he's like getting punked or on some like camera show, or like he's like, is it my birthday? Like, what is this? And so Binford comes in as Cody and starts blasting up the place. And again, Gary's to think this is some kind of joke, that it's like, hey man, like this is some cool effect, whatever you guys are doing. And so Cody is to just kind of confirm to this guy, like, yeah, this isn't a joke. We also have it where Binford is to light up Gary, and his chair is to consistently just start spinning around. So Gary is getting pelted with bullets just firing off of him. And so of course it's the effect of like him getting like freaking hit with all these things while his chair is spinning around. And so like there was such a cool effect there. And so Cody ends up going off and, of course, is to just another guy down. So, of course, now people are getting even more of realizing that this is Binford. Like, there's a bunch of eyewitnesses that were to basically describe him to, I'm sure, a lot of police officers and whichever. So this is to all of a sudden have us realize that Binford is technically the Joker before the Joker movie was actually a thing. Because at some point, we have Dr. Jerry, who is to go and tell his captain that he finds Binford to be a criminal because of society, or like a victim of society, where like a lot of people had never given Binford the time and day, and this just started to build and build and build into Binford to where he just like exploded. So Dr. Jerry and Officer N is to also find out that Binford's aunt was to have actually been Binford's mother the whole time, and the reason why she gave up her dancing career was to have Binford, and so I guess his aunt was to forcibly need to take care of him, and so she ended up giving up her dancing career because like she had an accident anyways. So Dr. Jerry's like, God, this kid like never had a chance. Like never had a chance. Like everyone lied to him, everyone manipulated him, everyone just told him like basically like rejected him and just heckled him and whatever. Like this guy has just been through the ringer, so much so that like Binford is meeting random women and just random people and just forcing this movie knowledge on them. Like, Binford is making his way to the Chinese theater and seeing women come out of there. And so Binford's like, hey, did you know Marilyn Monroe? Like, lived here for a while, did you know? And so they're just like, okay, all right, you loon. He's like chasing after them with this movie information. And it's so, like, it's hilarious, but then it's also just like, man, this guy is really just starting to, like, I see this as almost like an American Psycho kind of thing, where when Patrick Bateman is to just gear up for a kill, he starts to listen to music and is to rattle off all this music information. And, like, that kind of feels like this same exact scenario, where in this case, Benford is to rattle off all this movie knowledge and to just kind of force people to learn any of this. So now we have to get into the big climax of this movie, because I think I've ran out of kills in this film. If at some point I didn't get to everything, or at some point I kind of, like, really didn't care about Dr. Jerry and his story, sadly enough. Like, he's just an irrelevant character to the rest of this film. Like, he's basically just the guy that at the end is to try and stop Binford for doing what he's doing, but he really doesn't even get that far with that. So now we get at a point where Dr. Jerry is to find out that the killer of this movie is to supposedly be Cody Jarrett. And so now Dr. Jerry is to try to figure out who Cody Jarrett is. He's like, you know what, that sounds so familiar. Why does that sound so familiar? And then he is to realize that of course is the guy from a movie called White Heat, and that when Dr. Jarrett is to go to Binford's home, he realizes that Binford had changed his name to Cody Jarrett. So he's like, oh my god, like, there's a connection here. Like, Binford has to have killed all of these people. So Dr. Jerry is chasing after Binford now. And so Marilyn is to now have this new acting gig. Like, she's not quite sure who it is, but it seems like there is to be a guy flipping the bill to have Marilyn do this job. And so she's like, okay, this is great. More money in my pocket. So Marilyn is to head off to the studio to find that there, of course, is to be, of course, Binford there, presenting himself as the Prince Regent of Carpathia. And he is, of course, to be recreating the movie of The Prince and the Showgirl. The Prince and the Showgirl, which, of course, is a Marilyn Monroe film. So they both end up bowing to one another, and that is to, of course, mimic the Prince and the Showgirl movie. So both the Prince, supposedly, and Marilyn are going off, and so the Prince is taking photos of Marilyn, and we at some point have the prince giving Marilyn drugs, drugging her. And so Dr. Jerry is to break in to stop all this. And so Dr. Jerry breaks in, and Cody, or Binford, is to have this gun and is to hold it out to wait for someone to come in. And when Dr. Jerry does, Binford shoots Dr. Jerry in the leg. And so both Binford and Marilyn run off together to make it to the Chinese theater. So now Dr. Jerry is with his officer chasing after them, and he's like, "Oh, my leg!" Because wouldn't his leg hurt at this point? So they go off to the Chinese theater. Binford just goes into some empty theater room, and Jerry again is chasing after them. And so Binford is losing it. He's trying to go and trying to press his body against the theater screen to try, I guess, to force himself to get into a film. To, I guess, try to perform some Arnold Schwarzenegger last action hero kind of moment, which he cannot do because this, of course, is technically a movie put into reality. Wouldn't that be an interesting piece of how to finish up this film, where we just find Binford is to be infused into a movie, and we're like, whoa, like, I guess this guy wasn't all that human after all. Or there was, like, some kind of goofy thing where, like, maybe there was some cinematic ghost or spirit or something all along that just infused with Binford, and then he got sucked back into a movie, and that's how, like, the movie just ends. So, but that's not how it all plays out. So, Binford and Marilyn are still running away from Dr. Jerry, still trying to shoot him if they're to get close. So Binford, Maryland are on the top of this Chinese theater. The captain of the police and all of his men are to start whipping out their guns, their sniper rifles, and whichever, to go and shoot down Binford if he is to start shooting into the crowd of these people. So Binford is to go and have Maryland continue to go and take drugs to eventually join him, because Binford is to go off to the side of this building, and he is to, of course, get shot by one of these sniper men. So Binford goes and gives Marilyn more drugs and is to tell her that she's going to join him eventually. So Binford goes on and is to recreate a scene from Cody Jarrett's film where his character is to end. And so now Binford is to make his way onto the Chinese theater's rooftop and is to recreate this scene, and then is to get shot multiple times because, bizarrely, Binford has his gun in the air. In the air, he's not shooting down at anybody or whatever, but they shoot him anyways. And so now Binford's last act is to jump off of this roof to die. And so that's sadly how this movie is to end. With, of course, the person not getting the help that they need at the end. There isn't this psycho ending where they get the killer and kind of send him away to a mental hospital for him to get the help that he needs and so on and so forth. No. The guy just falls off the roof of this building and dies. So that's how the movie is to end, sadly. So yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end this. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.